All right, kicking things off for us now, we welcome back Jim Crosby, and Jim is discussing behavioural assessment versus behavioural prediction. How is that crystal ball working?
Oh my God, it's me again.
Oh, I better take my signs with me.
Yes. Oh my God, it's me again. Yes, you will get rid of me. This is the well, we've got tomorrow, but that's a whole different thing. But this is the last you're gonna have to put up with me for today. And I apologize for it all being together, but this is just how things worked out. Anyway, let's talk about assessments versus predictions. We've heard in a couple of the other sessions some concerns and applications of behavioral assessments. And tomorrow we're actually going to talk about assessing physical bites and the behaviors involved in bites themselves, and being able to compare wounds, wound morphology, dog jaws, and a lot of other things together to be able to look at the physical aspects. But right now we're going to talk about behavioral evaluations as they apply in the shelters themselves. And I know I keep coming up to this slide, but I love Beaker the Muppet, and I love the idea that behavior is difficult to understand. But let's talk about what a behavior evaluation is. Evaluations, and this is all, this is my way of looking at things. Your mileage may vary. This is done by a professional driver on a closed course. The regular rules of existence may or may not apply. But in any case, in my view, and based on the experience I've had, which has been having hands-on, I keep forgetting you guys are over here. They should have brought everybody out here. I've had hands-on right around 60 dogs that have killed human beings after the attacks, and have been able to lay hands on them, to run them through some behavioral tests. I've also had the opportunity, since I've run 2 animal control agencies in the U.S., both of which took in 13,000 plus dogs a year. I've literally met thousands of dogs. I've worked a number of major dogfighting cases, both in the U.S. and also down in U.S. territories outside the country. And so I've had my hands on hundreds of fighting dogs and alleged fighting dogs. And when you see something about it being fighting dogs, for instance, go back to the Michael Vick case, which was the famous football player that got caught. Mike's dogs were not very good as far as fighting dog quality, so there's a lot of range of behaviors there. But anyway, I've had my hands on a lot of dogs, and I had a lot of experience with them. To me, evaluations are something we need to use to look for why something happened. A behavior assessment or behavior evaluation, and I'm going to come back to this a couple of times, is a single snapshot with a particular person in a particular environment at a particular time, with all kinds of other possibilities hanging around. A behavior assessment, in my view, and I know there are people who disagree, should never be a single live or die test. And I'll repeat that, should never be used as a single live or die test. Also, an evaluation cannot adequately be done if it's just a general, let's go exploring kind of expedition. The evaluation must have a purpose. Otherwise, it's a matter of flailing around and making noises and coming up with arbitrary numbers that may not have anything to do with reality or with being able to decide what the dog did yesterday or is going to do tomorrow. There are differences between evaluations and observations. An observation of behavior is passive. It's general. You're kind of watching something. It's usually conducted distantly at a remove, whether it's a matter of feet or by video. And the observation is directed, but it's still external. It's where you are the observer, the scientist, whatever, outside the fish tank. To me, a fair and better evaluation is an active process that involves give and take. It is specific. I'm not looking for instance, if I'm evaluating a dog that has killed somebody, I'm not trying to find out whether Fluffy is generally friendly. Well, those terms are meaningless in the first place, but it's useless. I want to know why Fluffy took out this person on that date in that circumstance, what the proximate triggers were, and what the contributing factors were, what led us to. That's what got me into looking into these fatal attacks years ago. I wanted to know how and why the human-canine bond that has existed for 30, 40,000 years. Here in Australia, this territory has been occupied by people for up to, like 40,000 years? And I think the archaeological record shows, and the mythological and belief system record shows that there has been an intimate relationship between the people of this land and the canids of this land for a very, very long time. So, and I just totally got off track there. Anyway, I wanted to see how it was that the bond between the canines and humans could go so wrong to result in the death of the human. I mean, we do horrible things to dogs all the time, but it's much rarer that it goes the other way. So to me, my evaluations have a purpose in trying to figure out a specific set of triggers. To get that result, to me, an evaluation is active. I am giving and taking. There is exchange of information, exchange of signals. No, I don't want to, and it's why when I've been approached by production companies, I have no interest in doing a TV show and becoming he who shall not be named in my country. Because if I do my job right, I'm not provoking a bite or a negative response. I'm looking for those signals and actively interacting on lower levels to find out what could be the triggers for that particular individual dog's behavior. So it's active. An evaluation is specific. I'm looking for specific things, very often centered around what I know about the incident that's happened. It's hands-on. I don't feel like I can fairly and properly give the kind of give and take and sense the signals as clearly if I'm just across the room watching somebody else walk the dog back and forth than if I have hands-on contact with that dog. Because with a lot of these dogs, to get hands-on contact, we've got to establish a relationship. So the dog's got to feel me out, I've got to feel the dog out, and I'm gaining information. And so it's a participatory process. As the quote here says, failure to form relationships with social animals who are inclined to form relationships means failing to understand or communicate with that animal. If I'm not establishing a relationship, even short term, then I am missing truly communicating with that animal. And for those of you who haven't read it, that book I quoted from, How to Study Animal Minds, is a very good book about the dangers of not only the dangers of anthropomorphizing, but the fact that we can make emotional and mental connections with other than our species to be able to somewhat at least understand what's going on and what their sense of mind might be. But first principle we've got to think about is, why are we evaluating the dog we're evaluating? Is it just because we want to document what we've got? Is it because we've got the goal of adopting the dog? Is it because we're trying to diagnose behavioral problems to look for a treatment plan, or whether even there is a plan, or maybe the prognosis for working with that dog? I'm looking for, very often, triggers for specific behaviors. Why did the dog act this way in this circumstances? And behavior evaluations also are used for determining the suitability for particular assignments or purposes, such as, is this dog likely to make a good detector dog? Is it going to be a good patrol dog for the police? Is it going to be a useful dog for going into the backcountry and using scent to make, for instance, a koala census of an area, or another of a threatened species? They can find them with scent far easier than we can find them by poking around in holes in the bush. So, evaluating physical characteristics. This is Meredith. Meredith was a fighting dog in a case that I investigated and helped the law enforcement on. The evaluation I conducted on that case, of all of the 107 dogs involved, where we convicted the guy of training for dog fighting, had two parts to it. First, physical documentation of the injuries, and like I said, this was poor Meredith, who did wind up being successfully adopted and placed. But she had facial scarring, she had infections, but we needed to document all of that for the criminal prosecution. So this is an example of how I document a dogfighting scene, including how I'm recording it and documenting what I see and hear. Let's see if it goes off on its own. Good. It takes a second because I'm a crummy video editor. So I got some dead space in the beginning. Okay.
Come here, baby. Come here. Okay, this is Alpha 201. Alpha 201, male, not neutered, intact. Tan with white face, some white on chest, dark fur on front, maybe from the dirt.
That's a police radio in the back.
Dentition is normal, teeth appear sound.
Heather.
Pink spot on the nose. Minimal but scarring present on left side of face.
Ma'am, are you taking...
Okay, that was a combined documentation. Number one, I was going over the dog, doing a visual gross check for injuries, for scarring, for abnormalities, all of those factors that would add together. Secondly, by videotaping this on the site, and this was only a matter of minutes after we'd gone in with the SWAT team and secured this site and taken suspects into custody, and this is the very beginning of going through this particular site. It showed the jury the conditions the dogs were living in and what they were like in real time. So they could see that the huge truck-sized chain this dog was on. They could hear me saying, you know, the teeth are normal, but this and this and this. The teeth were an issue because dog fighters sometimes will, for breeding purposes, will file down the canine teeth of the females, because the females don't particularly want to be bred by that male, and yet the dog fighters don't want their males to get torn up. They'd rather be torn up by another male in a fight where they can make some money. So they alter the dental structure to try to minimize redirection towards a breeding dog. But this shows also my initial reaction with or interaction with each and every dog, so it gives an idea of baseline behavior in their own place, in their own home, being approached by somebody in a non I don't want to say non-judgmental, but in a neutral manner, to see and gauge their responses to humans, and also how they interact with the dogs around them. And so this is an evaluation, or the beginning of an evaluation, with a purpose. The purpose was to assess the dogs for the criminal responsibility of the person that was keeping and fighting them. This was to judge their physical needs as far as those that needed hospitalization. Literally around the back of a set of bushes there was another dog with an eye hanging out that had not been treated. So we were able to document that lack of veterinary care on the spot. There was no question that, well, the police actually did this. No. Here's the, and I keep using the phrase, but here's the sights, sounds, and smells of the battlefield right here. So that's one purpose of an evaluation. That was documentation for the most part only. The further interactions I had with those dogs over the following few days established more clarity on their individual behavior and which ones we could take a chance on rehabilitating, which ones needed only minimal attention and intervention, and which ones didn't make it. Now, if all you're asking is a dog going to bite? Will a dog bite? We can save you a whole lot of money because the answer is yes. The question is, when, under what circumstances, how hard or how often? If you provoke any animal to the point where it has to defend itself, it's going to do so. Or it's going to, especially if it suffers from learned helplessness, which is a very long subject, but where the dog has been punished so arbitrarily and so severely that it won't defend itself anymore, then it's just going to go over in a corner and lie down and basically die. But if you push anything far enough, of course they're going to bite. The problem with some of the tests and the tools we have out there is that, in the words of some friends of mine, Dr. Gary Petronik and Dr. Janice Bradley, the quote is, the tests then attempt to elicit biting or warning behavior by introducing various stimuli as described. However, the behaviors defined as problematic, and even those deemed disqualifying, vary from test to test, as do the stimuli. That goes to something we're going to address in a minute, and that is, are behavior evaluations valid? Are they reliable? Are they repeatable? Do they meet the scientific standards for what we require in any kind of significant testing? Evaluations are not a contest. It's not pushing a dog till it snaps. There's no magic going on when we're evaluating. It's very clear there are behaviors and triggers and signals we are looking for. And please, folks, it's not whispering. There is no dog whispering going on in any kind of scientific or reputable environment. It doesn't exist. And it's not pushing a dog to bite for good television. That's not useful in any way. Where did evaluations originally come from? Well, they come pretty much from the working dog world. These are some examples in the past. Working dogs for herders, for shepherds and so forth, were very important, but you didn't want to spend 2 years of your life trying to train a dog to herd your sheep that really didn't like sheep. So it was a way to assess puppies and young dogs for potential working ability. When I first started training dogs, I ran retrievers. I trained them for hunters. I trained them as tracking dogs. I worked them in competitions. And if I had to wait, if I expended a ton of behavior with 6 puppies and only one of them was going to work out as a competition dog, it would be more efficient for me to have been able to exclude 2 or 3 or 4 from the extended time period that I was spending training for competition if there was a way to select those that were more likely to succeed. In the middle, you've got the police-type working dogs. These dogs, to get good ones, is very difficult. No, your police department does not want the mean dog that your neighbor is trying to dump. They're highly selected. Quite frankly, most trainers, I have worked with my canine unit. I did not train the dogs. I refuse to train protection dogs for the public because I don't think they need them. Those dogs, by the time that you get done selecting them and training them, they're like the canine equivalent of an F-35 attack jet. They're very specific, they take a lot of maintenance, and there's a lot of work going on there. Detector dogs, a little bit looser. I've trained some drug and bomb detection dogs. You fail out most of the dogs that you start with. So evaluations were one way people were using to try to evaluate which candidates were likely to succeed and were worth the input of time and effort. Their purposes were for working purposes. Our purposes are a little bit different, and they can be variable. Sometimes it's because we're trying to place them, we're trying to adopt them, we're trying to match dogs with families, we're trying to match dogs with behavior levels to activity levels and so forth of the people that are likely to be their new guardians and owners. I look at it as a diagnostic process, and we're going to get into that as we go along. But we're trying to establish certain parameters. This is the video of me working with a dog that had been accused of killing someone, a 4-year-old child. And if you watch, I'm isolated here, and sometimes I have to do evaluations in non-ideal places. But what we're documenting here is the dog's responses to, and this is only part of the evaluation, the responses to certain stimuli and condition. First, I'm standing there and giving no feedback, and I'm in a very neutral position. Well, the dog isn't showing any signs of aggression and is not particularly showing a lot of stress. He's just trying to figure out what's going on here. When I start to respond, he comes over and solicits positive attention. He's willing to and able to take treats and to take them gently. A dog that's highly stressed is not going to take a treat. It doesn't matter whether you've got a pepperoni or a T-bone steak. They're not going to take it. He's looking at me. He's allowed me to come close. He's closed the distance himself. There's a lot going on here that I can point to. He responds to a sit with a single command. This is a dog that, although it was picked up in the area as a stray, is somewhat humanized. He's allowing me to stroke him. I'm not only watching to see if he avoids me, but I'm looking for pain points. He lets me manipulate him. I'm getting a lot of positive information from this dog that is helping me exclude this dog from having committed the incident that he's accused of. Now, there were other features that added into this. I took bite mark impressions. I was at the autopsy and documented the wounds to the child. My overall recommendation was this was not the dog responsible, and we did have DNA come back that absolutely excluded this individual dog from this case. But the beginning of that exclusion started when I got to the scene, but began for real right here, seeing that this is not a particularly fearful dog. This is not a dog that's showing negative behaviors. So how have we been assessing? Well, we've got tools out there. Here in Australia, you have BARC. There is the SAFER test in the US. There's Assess-A-Pet. There's Matchup. The Swedish Army has a working dog test that they use for their military dogs. CBARC is a survey test. There's the American Temperament Testing Society that has their own set of tests. There are a number of tools out there, but the problem is that for a tool to be actually useful, number one, we need to know what the tool is looking for. All of the tools that are out there are pretty much meant to be predictive. They're meant to try to guess what the dog's going to do 3 months from next Tuesday. I look at them differently because the scientific evidence is that as predictive tools, they are generally, as Gary Pratonik from Tufts said, no more accurate or inaccurate than flipping a coin. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have value, but there are some criteria that are needed to be scientifically useful. Number one, the tool has to be valid. In other words, the tool is asking the question that you're trying to answer. Second, it has to be reliable. So your tool has to show that most of the time, if not all the time, it actually does reveal the characteristics you're looking for. And number three, it has to be repeatable. And I'm going to expand on that in just a minute. But you have to be able to do it over and over again and have it keep working. It can't just be a one-shot deal. Let's look at this dog and just kind of look at this behavior to see, and this is not the same dog as before, but this is very active behavior that's very conflicted. Looking at this behavior doesn't tell me anything specific about that dog, but it gives me a general place to start. These two videos are me assessing two dogs that were labeled as reactive. You know, that's a term that gets thrown around in shelters and gets thrown around by trainers and so forth all the time. But do we have a definition of what that is? Well, let's look at these two dogs. First one here. Now, the setup is that there is, in both of these, there's a dog coming in through that door to the left. This dog, you can see, he's focused. He definitely has got radar eyes on this dog, but he is showing appeasement signals. He's licking his lips. He's waving his tail back and forth. His body is struggling forward, but it's more in a welcoming and greeting posture. This dog, on the other hand, is also focused on the other dog that's going to be coming in. But this dog is much tenser. Tail's not wagging. The eyes are hard. The mouth is closed. It's tight. And him lunging and snapping at the other dog is predictable. Yet we say these are both reactive dogs. They both have reactions to other dogs that one place might pass and another place both might fail. So we have to be sure that our evaluations produce terms and definitions that can actually tell us something. One of the ways we can evaluate dog-dog interactions, at least, is in playgroups. But playgroups themselves vary a lot. This is pretty much standard reciprocal play. they stop, they start, they change roles.
Just another minute or so.
But you can also have dogs that in play situations will show bullying and show victimology. The problem is that since we don't have a standard tool to apply, what person or group A may find to be acceptable play, group B finds to be over the top and likely to cause problems, and group C thinks it should be even more energetic and before you start interrupting or whatever. So our tools have to be better defined. When we're evaluating, we need to realize that there are problems with the tools. They're often, especially with the tools I mentioned, they're focused on anticipating future behavior and anticipating and establishing qualities that are going to make good adoptions. Well, yes, they're meant to be predictive. First thing is, that predictability is not established as reliable or valid. The Bark study done here in Australia a few years back and was published, as far as aggression and undesirable tendencies, they were only able to predict correctly in the low 30% range. That meant that the test 2 times out of 3 was either flat out wrong or at least gave an inappropriate and inconsistent result. I said, Gary, Dr. Petronik up at Tufts has looked at a bunch of these tests. They are not scientifically valid because the results tend to be not repeatable from dog to dog. If I test 3 dogs and then another person comes in and tests the 3 same dogs, we should pretty much agree on the evaluation of each of those dogs if we have a proper, reliable tool that is consistent across those repetitive tests. We should also be able to have 3 people or however many people evaluate the same dog and come up with pretty much the same results regardless of the person. These tests also need to be repeatable across location and time. The evaluation I do today and the evaluation I do Saturday, if there's been no behavioral intervention, should be pretty close. And yet, they're not coming through that way when looked at scientifically. Even the ASPCA kind of hedges their bets. They say that, for instance, current scientific thinking on the usefulness of behavior assessments in predicting aggressive behavior is inconclusive. And I agree with that. What may produce, if we first define what aggressive behavior is, what may produce the behavior today in one circumstance may not produce it tomorrow. So there are significant limits even to using evaluations as a diagnostic tool. It's never the same situation. The dogs may not show their typical reaction in a stressful or strange environment like a shelter or at a rescue, and the tester may behave differently than the victim. All of us in this room have habits, conscious and unconscious, that we have developed in dealing with dogs. All of us. A lot of them are unconscious habits that we have just accumulated and repeated over time that we can't even necessarily explain to somebody why we do them or may not even be aware that we do them. But our behavior interacting with a dog may be significantly different than the guy walking down the street that just wants to come up and pet your puppy. Or may be significantly different than the behavior of the people in the home in which you're trying to place that dog. Testers' behavior definitely affects the results. Some of the tests for dogs don't make sense at all. Some of the stuff we've asked them to do in the past, it doesn't make sense. I joke about this being the Florida temperament test. You've got a bunch of different dogs or a bunch of different creatures, and you're going to evaluate them on the same test. And so you're going to ask all of them to climb a tree. Well, I think the monkey's going to be okay. The penguin is probably going to be pretty challenged, and that fish has no chance. Some days we're trying to compare elephants and fish when we're doing these evaluations on the behavior of dogs. This is a quick scenario I want you to watch. This was a dog that had mauled somebody in the UK and done a significant amount of damage. But I was looking for two things. Number one, the reaction to an approaching stranger, and you'll see I have a police officer that approaches twice, once in a neutral manner, once in a... He wasn't very scary, but I told him to put his jacket over his head and come in going, ah, and try to be weird. And so he wasn't very weird. But I was also looking for what level of startle I would get from the dog, whether I could interrupt any reactive behavior from the dog, and how easily and how quickly the dog could return to baseline. Now, I'd been working with this dog for about 30 minutes out in a field, so she and I had a bit of a relationship. But watch the body language particularly. She sees the oncoming person, and like I said, watch the body language, the positioning, and the actions of the dog. Dog backs up, stays close to me, wags tail, doesn't perceive a particular threat, even though there's noise in the background from other dogs, and everything's pretty cool here. Scary person comes, dog reacts differently. Even though she's not out front, she's already defending me. Initially, she flattens down when I raise my arm, which is something that I had to consider later. But I can easily interrupt her. When I tell her to sit, she sits. Boom. No problem. She resets back to zero pretty quickly. This dog was destroyed due to the laws in the UK, but this is a dog that, despite the attack she was involved in, might have been workable if there were the resources and talented people that could have spent the time. So, what question was I asking with that dog? Was it that she was a good adoption candidate? No. I was looking for causes and contributing factors to the incident we have. So, behavior evaluations for investigation of bites is not to determine whether a particular dog lives or dies or whether it's adoptable, but to look for the factors as to how and why something happened. What problem does the dog have, if any? Can we establish remediation? Can I fix this, or is there somebody else that I know who can fix it better and has the resources or time? These are the kinds of questions that I'm asking. These are the issues of what I really want to know. Why they bit, who was responsible, can it be fixed, should it be fixed? Is the possible downside of it so severe that maybe we could fix it someday, but the exposure to danger is far too heavy between now and then? I'm going to jump ahead slightly here. For instance, with these, I'm looking for specific contributing factors, but and we've talked a little bit about the scientific. Is the evaluation repeatable? Is it the same from dog to dog? Is it the same from tester to tester? But I want to cover a couple of real quick tools here that are being used, and I'm probably going to hurt somebody's feelings, and I'm not sorry. You're here, I'm in the U.S., you probably can't throw things at me that far. Fake hands. We have people that insist that they want you to stick a fake hand in a dog's bowl to see if they're food guarding. Well, guess what? The other day when I got here and was tired and hungry, if you'd stuck a fake hand in my plate before I had a chance to go upstairs and crash, I'd have bitten you. You know, no question. And I'd also probably said ugly things to you and been really obnoxious. My dogs know the difference between a piece of plastic on a stick, and if you try poking them in the face long enough with a piece of plastic on a stick, they're probably going to get highly upset and walk away because they want nothing to do with you. Fake hands don't tell us anything. Yes, there are some people who demand the hand in the food bowl test. If it's going to be that, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to walk towards a food bowl that's by the dog. If the dog looks up at me and goes, I don't have to poke him. I already know there's an issue. Stuffed dogs, the stuffies. Yeah, no, they're not real dogs, and the dogs know it. They say, well, it's the first 3 seconds we want to think about. Wait a minute. When dogs see each other and interact, they exchange signals. We talked about earlier, body posture, where their eyes are, respiration rate, all these things. The stuffy just stands there. Well, the dog has got, the real dog, at least, I think, probably thinks that the stuffy's insane. Maybe it's a threat, or maybe it's a toy. So I'll go grab it and play with it. The other one is the creepy kid dolls. What are we going to check to see if a dog is reactive to children? Well, we're going to get a doll out that stands like this and then hop it up and down, chasing the dog across the room. And if the dog's got any sense, it's going to look up and go, hey, I'm out of here. I'm gone. Is that doll that has no changing expression, has fixed body language, and is artificially looking like the ideal child, which neither of mine ever did, is that valid? No. Is it better than nothing? Well, it's something, but we don't know exactly what it is yet. Now, there is a cost to not evaluating, or to at least ignoring evaluations. This was a rescue that placed a dog that should have been declared dangerous from the beginning. They ignored the warnings, and ultimately what happened is the dog was adopted by unknowing parents at a PetSmart, taken home, and within 15 minutes of arriving at the house, had inflicted level 5 bites on both of the adults. This was completely preventable because 3 rescues before the one that took him all said, this dog has failed our observation and evaluation, is too aggressive. Quick on this, I responded to and this is part of why I think so much about the, I'm wrapping. The stuffies. 34 dogs were seized in a fighting ring in Ontario, in Canada. A team brought in by the Ontario SPCA did an evaluation on all these dogs, and they said they were all too vicious to put in the communities and too nasty and were a danger to too many people. Cuddles was one of the dogs, and this is the paragraph from the evaluations, and you can see that their high concern was based on Cuddles' reaction to the stuffed dog. We believe this dog would pose a significant danger to other dogs if placed in the community. Well, she did. She posed a threat of earning an APDT PhD training certificate in a prison dog training program. This dog lived in close proximity with a bunch of other dogs and a bunch of people. Dallas, similarly relegated to being dangerous to the community. He is, because he took drugs and money from drug dealers and weapons off of people. So he became dangerous in that community to the bad guys. Both of these dogs were labeled as being mandatory to be killed. When I went up, I evaluated the dogs, made some decisions on which ones had better prognosis than others, and we wound up saving a significant number of the dogs. We need to document these evaluations when we do them. We need to be clear on our results. Don't tell me they're just friendly dogs. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is I wanted to make it clear that you can't guarantee future behavior, positive or negative, but we can use evaluations to look, to gather data, and to be clear about the limitations of those evaluations, and to be able to try to use tools that are out there to make decisions, understanding that there's no such thing as a tool that works even regularly reliably right now. And my recommendation is you have your entire staffs, when you have the opportunity in a shelter, to be looking at the dog and form a consensus based on the behaviors you see day in and day out, rather than on a single occasion. Thanks.